often people have the experience of having conditioning that collapses around sex, love, relating, and romance. So it's like, if I have romance with this person, then I should have sex with them, or if I have romance, then I should have a relationship, or if I have romance, then that means I should fall in love. Like there's these strange collapses that we see between these four different things. And when we realize that, like, we can have love exist and we don't need to relate to that person, it opens up this whole other experience of life.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we are here in ckShame land.
Woohoo!
And we're going to talk a little bit about fucking.
Yeah.
But not shame.
We talk about shame.
I mean, we're not directly discussing having sex with shame.
Right.
That's what I meant by that.
Yeah.
Which would be weird.
Right.
Although I did say that thing, where were we walking? And I was like, I came up with this weird, saying, if you're going to fuck anything, fuck shame.
Yeah. I like that. And
I meant that more for guys who are considering cheating or being unfaithful or doing other things that may ruin your relationship. The whole idea, if you're going to fuck anything, fuck shame. So do whatever it is that's needed to go destroy your shame before you leave the faith of your the rest of your life in somebody else's hands.
Exactly.
All right. We should get going.
Yep.
Do you know where did I put those drums?
Oh, they're over here. Hold on one sec. Okay, and
this one comes to us from the Elizabeth Graham, and it says, "Beautiful guidance. I am so grateful that I sat down and listened to this podcast. I've been feeling so out of alignment lately, and listening to Sophie and Adi, I've been able to learn to trust my intuition again. This time period is so overwhelming with COVID, the atrocious human rights violations, and so much more that I felt powerless over, and it's so helpful to hear such grounded voices speak about these topics and help me realize that there are things I can do to make the world a better place. I struggle with voicing my opinion and setting boundaries, and this podcast, particularly Sophie, has really helped me realize not only the importance, but that I actually have that power within me. Thank you both for sharing." Thank you, Elizabeth.
Love that. And remember that we have a special gift that we send out, a package you get in the mail. It feels like Christmas every day when you win an Ignited package. So yeah, it's amazing. You get
I wish you guys would get to see Sophie posting up her hands over. She would did the megaphone thing you do when you're playing as a kid. It's like, post it, doop, 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 doop. Boop, 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 boop. That was amazing stuff.
Yeah,
Love it.
But yeah, we get to send you. So Elizabeth, please send us your address, DM us, email us, find us, and we will send you your package.
Yeah, smoke signals, whatever works.
And just know, for anyone else that's listening, if you go on to wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple, we will, if we read your review on air, we will send you a package too.
Yeah.
So the quote that I found today is from our guest Victoria's Instagram, and it's a Carl Jung quote, and it says, "Whenever we touch nature, we get clean. People who have got dirty through too much civilization take a walk in the woods or a bath in the sea. Entering the unconscious, entering yourself through dreams, is touching nature from the inside, and this is the same thing. Things are put right again." Carl Jung.
Love it. Man, Carl Jung. We can get a lot into the shadow work and all this amazing remnant of Carl Jung's work. For any one of you who is on this weird bandwagon of deciding that new agey stuff in psychology is not okay, I urge you to read back the history of Carl Jung's work. And how poorly it was accepted and understood, and still to this day people debate it, right? So different flavors, different strokes for all of us.
Absolutely. We love this guest today, Victoria. We listen to you guys. We know you want more sex, more intimacy, more vulnerability. So here we are sharing an amazing guest. And if you love this episode after listening, go check out Alexandra Roxo episodes. We have at least 2 on here. We love to talk about this stuff. We have a going deep. Actually, we have the entire month of December last month. So go back to December podcast. There's 4 of them. And all 4 of them have incredible guests, all focusing on female sexuality and intimacy. And then we have an amazing going deep episode at the end of that month about MDMA, our own sexuality, different things, stories about our sexuality and just our relationship. So yeah, lots of fun sexually related episodes on the podcast to go back to if you want more. And let us know how you like this episode by taking a screenshot, tagging us, tagging Victoria, and just letting us know what your favorite aha moments were.
Yeah, I mean, we try to hit these topics from areas that are, or directions at least, that are a little bit different than the stuff you'd hear before. So we get into a lot of topics you've never heard here about before, like controlling ejaculation and connecting intimately and all that kind of stuff, which is, to me, it's always fun to explore things from a direction that we just haven't looked at. And just like Elizabeth pointed out, on the front end, we really try to be that place that you go to get answers, to get approaches, to get even ways of looking, perspectives.
Yeah, different perspectives. And as she talks about a lot in this podcast, sexuality, just like spirituality, just like anything it's endless. So there's lots of different angles. There's a lot of different ways to understand information. And when it comes to sexuality, it is so vast. It is so layered. So to really be able to access, the enlightenment from her perspective, it's really helpful. And just stay open, listen to this with your partner, send this to your partner, to your bestie. We really appreciate you spreading the word. And here we go.
Enjoy.
This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, welcome everybody. We are back with Victoria Redbard. Victoria, when I, as a man, look at your Instagram feed, my blood starts moving a little bit more quickly. You do a lot of work around sexual embodiment, and what I see, first off, when I look at your work is getting women more comfortable, and then I saw some work around male sexuality as well, but really getting women more comfortable with sexuality in general. That's something Sophie and I have talked about quite a lot. Would you mind walking us through how you got to this place and the journey that it took for you to now be a spokesperson and a trainer of other people who practice this?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm really passionate about sexual mastery. And I feel like that journey of sexual mastery is something that takes place just as an ongoing basis. It's like every day just making that commitment. And, the funny thing is about that commitment is it's like, I don't feel like I have to do anything to be committed to it. It's just like I wake up and every day it's like something is pulling me towards this topic, towards the things that I want to learn in this. Like I was in a bookstore the other day and I was like, oh, I still want to go to the journey, the section about sexuality. After all this time, I've been like, journeying all these ideas for like over a decade now. And it's just like this gravitational pull to just wanting to learn more and more every day. And, in the beginning of that journey was, it looked like, it's funny because I feel like I started my journey and then I started to go through my own sexual traumas and go through my own bad relationships. And coming on to the other side of that, there was this, like, there's always been this pull towards wanting to learn more. Like I remember when I was like 15 or something, I read a book around polyamory. I was like, I don't think that's normal for a 15-year-old.
Were you writing down the rules? You're like, okay, so
yeah.
we have to actually have to rules instead of like just started dating, already thinking about polyamory. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, there's got to be more, always more.
Yeah. And I think that's really beautiful because it's like your curiosity led you to your passions. And that's, we love that.
Exactly.
It's like, if you can do what you love and love what you do, that's the whole point. So you've been curious about this since a young age and intrigued and digging deep and reading books, and that now you're an expert, and that's the best path ever.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's been I think the two like really crossed over, like that, journey of the spiritual path, and then wanting to learn more about sexuality inside of that. I had like my journeys with like yoga and Ayurveda, and then like I still was feeling like I was like pushing uphill with my career. I was like, what is this like? What is my purpose? What do I want to do? And then I started to hear like these little like knocks of like, sexuality was coming up. And then I went out to do my ayahuasca journey in Brazil. Ended up winning an ayahuasca journey with my partner. So I feel like it was definitely pulling me.
You won? Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say you won an ayahuasca journey?
Yeah,
what
yeah.
Raffle or casino? When was that the winning?
It gets better. It gets better. It was on a Facebook sponsored ad. I got advertised.
Are you kidding?
That's amazing.
No, I'm serious.
Something that would never happen in the US.
I love that.
I love that. I guess never say
I know.
get products sent home.
Yeah.
Okay, so you won an ayahuasca ceremony, went with your partner, and then what happened?
Yep. I just got this, like, I had like absolutely no bad experience of ayahuasca, no purging, no like, it was just absolute pure bliss. Like the whole thing was like a massive orgasm, and I did 3 journeys, and the journeys were like, the first one was just like just seeing everything, just seeing my whole career and everything that I was supposed to do. And I was like, wow, this is going to take me like 10 years. And now that was like, 3 years ago or something. And I feel like I've already like done so many of the things that I was shown to do in this ayahuasca journey. It's like, write the books, like launch the school, like do all the things. So I just got really clear directives of like, this is what needs to happen. And then I just came back to Australia and then just started executing all those things.
Wow. Awesome. How old were you when you did that first ayahuasca journey?
Oh, it was only like 2016.
Oh, yeah.
So not long ago.
Yeah. So it didn't take 10 years.
Well, not yet.
No, it definitely didn't take 10 years. Yeah.
I don't know what it's like in Australia. I've been once for 5 days, so it's not a good representation of the country or the standards and morals, etc. But I imagine that diving into a field like this, especially talking about it in a pretty non-traditional, open manner, I'll just say. Did you find that there was friction? There were haters. There were people who would try to kind of talk shit and knock you off the pedestal, or how did that work?
Yeah, all the time still. And it's not even like, I do think Australia is a beautiful place to kind of be working with this, because I feel that most people in this country are very laid back. They've kind of got this like Aussie chill, like whatever you want to do, like whatever you're into kind of attitude. And I'm very glad, I'm from England, and I'm very glad that I'm doing it here and not there, because I think it would be even harder. Yeah. So yeah. And I mean, I've been very lucky. Like, it's interesting, like I had, my parents were quite conservative, and then after that ayahuasca journey and I started to really step into this, it's almost like they could really feel that it was my truth, and I never really had too much back from them. But it's been something that I've been joking about a lot recently I've been doing a bit of public speaking and stuff, and speaking at my events and things like that. And, there's been a lot of people just not really understanding the work that I do. So the work at the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy, which is the sexuality school, was based on a self-pleasure modality that I created. And self-pleasure is, for me, is a bit different from masturbation. It's like, masturbation is, we're going to like, have an experience of pleasure, arousal, or orgasm in some way, and that's kind of the goal of what we're doing. Whereas self-pleasure is like, how do we listen to the body and allow the body to speak to us, rather than it being like some sort of like creating something. And so what that can include is, it can include genital touch, or it could not. It's like, it's very open to what self-pleasure can look like when you start to approach the body in a listening way. Anyway, so I did a talk at an event that I was invited to a few weeks ago, and I was sharing this idea about like, what it's like to be witnessed in your self-pleasure practice. And then this woman just like stops me dead in my tracks, and she's like, do you just have sex with a dude that you don't find attractive? I was like, wow. Like, it just came out of nowhere. I was like, it took me so long to like piece together how, after me sharing about like this work of self-pleasure and being witnessed in your self-pleasure practice, she got that I would actually have sex with dudes that I don't find attractive. Anyway, so I pieced the dots together eventually in this conversation, and what was coming up for her was this idea that she was like, you know, to be seen in her sexuality, or what she was perceiving as her sexuality, she would need to find that person attractive. And so then, and that was like such a beautiful moment for me. It's like, I have these awakenings all the time. I'm like, oh, this is how people are perceiving this work, you know? Like, for me, like, being seen in my sexuality is like, you know, I'm in my sexuality right now, you know, there's so much that is, you know, just, it's such an open-ended experience to me. And it's the same thing when people ask me questions like, you know, are you having sex with this person or something like that? My answer is always like, what is sex to you? You know, where does sex start and end? You know, and it's like this conversation of just expanding. What is sexuality? What is sex? What is, you know, what do all these things really mean to us? And how do we open our minds to like the possibilities of all these things?
I love it.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's not even necessarily about haters so much as just almost like a complete misunderstanding of, or a misalignment between what they perceive sex to be, which again goes back to that either romance novel / you know, movie or porn kind of version of, well, that's sex. And if it doesn't fit in that container, then I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like these limited views that we have on sex is actually why it can be so difficult for people to come together. You know, it's like, if we just have this idea that, you know, if we're going to have sex, we must have penetrative sex. It's like, you're actually kind of missing out on so much of the intimacy that happens between, you know, here in the world, and then that moment of penetration. Like, so much magic that happens between there. So I think that there's so much to be shared for what the possibilities of sex are.
Yeah. And there's also so many layers, and like, by being curious about that journey before the actual quote sexual encounter, like, me personally, I've been with my partner for 16 years, and I still, if I don't have that time before, I'm not able to be present during sex. Like, I must have the buildup, and I've worked on my trauma. I'm out of that phase. We had some cheating on our relationship, as our listeners know, on both sides. We've opened up our relationship. We've done all sorts of things. And still 16 years later, if I don't have that buildup of because that flirting and touching and connecting and spending time together, that makes me feel turned on. And then the more turned on I become, the more open I can be. So like, that makes complete sense to just give it a whole, you know, it's a long process of, it's not just 0 to 100. It's like every step along the way.
Yeah, I love that. You know, the other thing that's in my mind with that is like this, like the aliveness and like the vulnerability of like, even when you've been with your partner for 16 years, like that ability to step into like, what is the edge in this moment? And sometimes that is like, you know, being with our emotions, or being with like, just like the, you know, maybe the tension in the relationship. And I think like the true intimacy is happening when we're in that moment. And that for me is the sex, you know, that's like the lovemaking, it's the dance when we have that experience.
I love that.
Yeah. So many more questions. This stuff reminds me of like David Data's work from the masculine side, right? And this is what we're talking about, Ryan, is a little bit more of the feminine, not necessarily female, but the feminine part of that experience, of the openness versus the kind of controlled and grounding of the male in that relationship. Is that some of the stuff you get into when you teach?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is quite feminine in that way, because it's really about like trusting that your intuition's guiding you. And you know, that is, yeah, I guess it's, in some ways I've actually sometimes described this self-pleasure modality as like what you do before meditation. You know, it's like sometimes, you know, to go and sit in meditation, it's like, and to connect to the stillness, it's like you're, you know, almost going up, you know, like in the body, it's like you're going into sort of maybe the third eye or the crown chakra almost, you know, like that sort of direction. And that is like the stillness, sort of the nothingness that is beyond the body. Whereas this work with self-pleasure is more like the descent into the body, you know, and so it's like being with all that's there, you know, and having the communication with the body through like the tantric tools of sound, breath, movement, and touch. And that is like the feminine path inwards, you know what I mean? And when we start to be with that connection to our body, it's like we're opening up the space to be able to go up with so much more ease. So it's like if you come and sit in meditation and you've got like, you just had a fight with your partner or something, like chances of getting any kind of experience of enlightenment is pretty much close to none. But what I've experienced is like when I open up my self-pleasure practice, even if I'm in a very like, if my body feels really dense with emotion, or just like there's a lot moving, or I feel really scattered, or whatever big energies are happening in my body, it's like I'm able to just access so much aliveness and so much like connection to like that oneness of, God, source, whatever we want to call it, through that experience.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. My goal is to do like between 1 and 5 minutes of meditation every day for September. And in order to get to the place where I can even sit and breathe for that 1 minute to 5 minutes, it's a whole process. It's a saging, it's a getting everyone out of the room, it's a hey, I need 5 minutes to myself, it's closing the door to the hallway and then the door to the room and then locking the ones to the outdoor, and then it's a Palo Santoing or a saging and then putting on my meditation music. It's a whole thing so that I can even drop in for 1 minute of breath work. Because same with sex, it's like the layers and the balls I have in the air and the to-do list and the stress, and then when you bring in another person, like it's one thing to drop into yourself and experience self-pleasure or meditation, but to then bring in another human being as your partner and your shared experiences and that present moment of which you are in, it adds all those extra layers and energetic dynamics, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of this work is like for me, it's been the process of like really learning to be with myself. So, when I was much younger, I would have the experience of like, I'll move into my arousal or move into my pleasure when I'm with a partner. And now it's like being able to locate that inside of myself and locate the everything that I'm looking for really inside of a partner, inside of myself, has been, a powerful journey into, completely shifting the way that I see sexuality and shifting the way that I relate to life and myself.
Beautiful.
Do you find that I assume the work translates because when you're more able to connect to your own arousal, sensuality, just those tender feelings, you can better connect to them with a partner. Sophie brought up something that, is interesting, and I don't want to say it's like the difficulty, the friction sometimes in bringing in another person is that they need to be in a similar place, or there needs to be a process to bring each other into that same place of connection and meditation and intimacy, right? An actual intimate spiritual and physical connection. And sometimes, I don't know if you've ever felt this, Soph, but maybe once in 16 years, sometimes one person is just completely ready. They're there. They feel very connected. And they, they go like this. And they go, I feel really alive and connected right now. And the partner's just like, get your hands off of me. And they're just, your partner is just stuck in a different state of mind. They're just, they're sort of grounded in a completely different experience in the same moment. I'd love to see, I'm sure this has come up a handful of times in work you've done. What do you find is really helpful for partners around that? We've heard and we've talked to people about like scheduling sex and things like that, but that speaks less to that internal experience that you're mentioning.
Yeah, there's the first thing that I feel to share is around this like concept that I'm calling like being the stronger mirror. And it is like it's actually something that I was teaching to women quite early on around, they were wanting to have a different experience with their partner during the sex itself. And I feel like that kind of translates into what you're sharing as well. And that is like to be the stronger mirror. What I was finding is that women would go to bed with men and they would have that experience of being like, well, I've just done all this self-pleasure work and I, now I know how to, connect to myself and I want this really, sensual experience. But the person I'm with is, not done meditation or not done any of the things or done self-pleasure. And so they were finding is that they couldn't and if they were to share with that particular partner, like, hey, can you, meet me in this? It would create a lot of friction and it was causing a lot of discomfort in the relationships. So then I started working with this idea of being the stronger mirror, which is, if I am wanting to have a certain experience with a partner and I'm wanting to shift the dynamic into a certain area or direction, what I would do is, instead of going, actually, can you slow down and can we have this experience? I would just shift I would shift all the energy into myself. And then I would just start being with my body in a different way. So if someone's like, let's say, like, this is a great example. Someone's like jackhammering, having sex with you. You know what I mean by jackhammer? It's like, right. And it's like, you don't want to have that experience. And I would just go, right, I'm just going to breathe into me, and I'm bringing all the energy back into myself. Mm-hmm. And what happens then is, like, all of a sudden they have this shift inside of their own being, where they're like, oh, what just happened, and then they have to and they actually come into this experience for themselves of just needing to know what's going on. And so that actually then stops them in their tracks. And when they come into realizing something shifted, what they see is I'm just sort of being with myself in whatever way that I want to be connected to in that moment. And then what that creates is, this synergy, and that's how I call it, being the stronger mirror, because in that moment it's I'm becoming the mirror that is stronger. There's always one sort of person that's creating an experience of leading, and in great sex that shifts in every single second. But in the sex that's there's not the synergy that you're looking for, it's you can really shift who is leading the experience. And so I feel like that translates to outside of the bedroom as well, with what you're sharing. It's what if you want to move towards your partner and they're not interested? It's how do we become the stronger mirror in that moment? And what I like to do is just if I can see that, my partner is very scattered or they're really stressed with something, it's just again, just being the stronger mirror. It's meeting them in that, and just but from this place of not polarizing with it. Something that's really common in relationships is to polarize with the energies that we're experiencing from a partner. So if I don't know, if someone is having is really in a bitchy mood or something, then it will instantly create inside of the other person this protection mode, And then so what can happen is, if someone's in a bitchy mood and then you come in with just meeting them there and just staying in the nothingness, and it's I see a graph of there's polarity over one side and then there's the opposite polarity in the other, and then there's a middle point, which I call erotic innocence, or almost like the black hole or the void or the nothingness, right? And I make this commitment to sit in that. So this is actually one of the ways that I have arguments or debates with my partner, is this experience where if I can feel that their stuff is coming up and that's making my stuff then actually come up at the same time, it's I just go to, okay, well, actually, how do I come into the void? And how I do that is the self-pleasure practice in that moment. Just come into the sensations rather than the thoughts. If someone's arguing with me, then it's really easy for me to go into, can't believe they just said that, or that kind of thought. And then I'll just come into okay, what's my sensations underneath? I can't believe they just said that. Yeah. And then if I just be with my body of the sensations of that feeling that I feel underneath it, I can't believe they just said that. Then it's I get to just journey that with I might just tap it or breathe into it and just leave that space. And then I'm actually able to meet them from the nothingness rather than the polarity thing. So how this translates into you, maybe moving on to your partner is and then being a no, is just what if you just fully drop into the presence of the no inside of their body, and we don't make it about us, that's a powerful practice when we can just go, I'm just with you in your no, I'm not trying to make you have a yes here. I'm just okay in your no. Yeah. And I just want to sit with you in your no. That's when it gets really juicy.
Well, and it becomes, the curiosity becomes on the way to a turn on, versus for me personally, if I was the one that was I'm wound up, I don't feel held and seen in this moment, or we just got into a fight and he's leaning in to have sex, to me, it's it feels even more pressure on that list of things that I have going on in my head. So if he then takes care of himself energetically, but stays present to me and then shifts the energy, like you said, by breathing or being with himself and not having an expectation on me, and he's just I'm going to breathe into this vibe, but hold space with you, then that curiosity of me being he actually just changed his tune. Now I'm curious. And then we're on our way to a possible new experience together instead of the turn off, which I really like.
Exactly.
So
yeah, amazing.
I have a question. I read some things about gut health and libido, and I'm really curious about this. I've never heard this before. I want to hear what you have to say about that specifically, and what your work is in that?
Um, well, I don't particularly work with anything like around gut health in the way of like working in particularly around, getting your gut healthy. But what is alive for me to share is the access point to our aliveness. And I believe that gets built up by the contractions that happen around what happens in the gut and also what just happens in the body in general. So, I speak of like Eros, and for me, Eros is the vibration that's underneath our sex. So it's like the life force energy, or it's life instinct. It's the part of us that wants to breathe, the part of us that wants to drink, the part of us that is hungry, the part of us that feels that experience of feeling horny. It's like the drive forward from there. And this vibration of like Eros, actually from there arises like our creativity, it arises our sex drive, it arises all those places. And what I find when I work with people that don't have access to their Eros, that part of them that wants to just be in life, get out of bed in the morning, it's like there's like contractions and stuff that's in the way. And that looks like conditioning, beliefs, like ideas that have been like handed on to them from their families, like all those kind of things. And all that stuff gets in the way of our libido. And it can get caught up in the gut. It can get caught up with like heartbreak. It can get caught up with, like the maybe erectile dysfunction, or, for women, it's like the vaginismus, these kind of experiences that they have are all based in contraction in the body. And so so a lot of the work that I do with people when they're wanting to have more sex, or they're wanting to up their libido, or they're wanting to come into connection with their partner, is around accessing where these pain points are. And sometimes that is in the gut, because it's like the stuff that we're creating around, what things need to be and how things need to be to have our sexual experience. So, an example of that would be like, oh, well, I can't, if we use your example that you guys just came up with, if you have like a man that's constantly connecting with a woman and she's like, no, it's like maybe she has a story come up that perhaps she's a slut unless she has sex for this particular reason, or there's many different things that we find around like the stories we tell ourselves if we were just to be in a sexual experience. Like actually a speaking gig that I was at on the weekend, this came up, and the woman was like, oh, if I, my man's always hitting on me and I'm not interested. And then we were like, what would it be like if you were? And she was like, oh, actually it would mean that I would be giving my power away. So there's like so many stories that we have around like what is in the way of us actually just dropping into intimacy at any given moment. And when we're stressed and we're pushing someone away because we're stressed, it's actually often like a protection. And that stress is actually protecting us from the deepest vulnerability that we can feel in our body.
I love it. You mentioned before we started that a lot of people that turn to you now are women who have been doing work and are looking to practice and help others. And I'm definitely seeing an opening of these discussions and this topic over the last 5-10 years or so. Typically when you are approached, and when you've done work in the past as well, is it women who come to you? Is it couples that come to you? What is the setup for most of the people you've worked with in terms of, I'm kind of interested in where the entry point is almost for the discovery.
Well, I do work with men, women, and couples, so that's different for all of them, obviously. And I usually find with like the theme that runs through all of them is like the desire for freedom, and freedom in every sense of the word. Freedom in sexual liberation, but also just freedom in their own experience of themselves. What I was just speaking to with that stuff that gets in the way of Eros and life force and living, is the conditioning that links the two. So like as an example, like often people have the experience of having conditioning that collapses around sex, love, relating, and romance. So it's like, if I have romance with this person, then I should have sex with them, or if I have romance, then I should have a relationship, or if I have romance, then that means I should fall in love. Like there's these strange collapses that we see between these 4 different things.
Yeah.
And when we realize that we can have love exist and we don't need to relate to that person, it opens up this whole other experience of life. And I guess that's one of the major things that I feel that I bring through for people is like the relationships that I have are, so deeply connected to what is alive and what is truth. And that truth actually trumps all the other things. It trumps like, oh, you should stay with this person because they are because you're in love with them, or you have great sex with them, or whatever the thing is. And I think that there's a power when we start to live from that place of like what is actually alive right now. And that's when we work with relating alignment inside of a relationship, above like whether we're having sex with someone or whether we're having romance or whether we're having love with someone, like there's a potency of life alignment that moves through that. And that's a lot of the work that I do with everyone. So it's just to summarize that, what it would look like is, a lot of in life we put like our partner first, and we put our relationship as the first thing we're prioritizing. It's like we must stay together against all odds, and it's like treating this relationship like this glass vase. It's very fragile and don't knock it off the shelf. It's like that kind of experience. And then we put our partner second, then we put ourselves last. And I guess the major teaching that I create is like to really flip that on its head and put yourself first, and then your partner, and then the relationship as like the foundation. It's like it's like holding you and your partner up to be able to have a thriving life.
Beautiful. Yeah, we completely agree on that. Yeah, it's all about the self. It's all about finding that wholeness within yourself. And again, 16 years of relationship. We haven't been married that whole time, but relationship and kids and all this stuff. It's like at the end of the day, if you're not whole, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not prioritizing your health, your well-being on all fronts, that's when the relationship suffers. It's not the other way around. The relationship suffers if each person, each individual isn't taking care of themselves in whatever capacity. Same in friendships, right? If one person in the friendship isn't taking care of themselves, like that reflects in conflict, that reflects in the relationship. So each person has to be whole, or people in different relationships has to take care of themselves first and foremost. I wanted to ask about ejaculation mastery. What does that mean?
Perfect. Well, I think that ejaculation mastery is the relationship to your ejaculation beyond any ideas of controlling it. So, you actually read a lot about ejaculation control. And I feel that, what the work that I've done with men around self-pleasure has been like what actually happens beyond that control. What happens when you're not trying to go, right, I'm going to go a year without ejaculating, And there's a tendency, I think, for men, when I've worked with them, to want to set a goal and to be, to create a certain, marker point of achievement of success. And what I've experienced is like the amount of guilt and shame and discomfort and pain that comes up for a man when he does ejaculate inside of these goals that he's created for himself is actually completely kind of missing the point of what can be created with ejaculation mastery. Because when a man has that relationship to his ejaculation, that it's actually beautiful, and that's an experience that he's choosing whenever he does choose it, then it's almost like the teaching has done itself. Because the way that I work with it is almost to drop into a relationship of surrender with the ejaculation. So, and a lot of people would say that surrender is kind of a feminine approach, I guess, like in the way, if we're using the word feminine as in like yin and yang rather than like man and woman. I'm definitely using it in that more yin way. And when a man has a relationship to his ejaculation in that yin, surrendered, feminine experience, it's so much easier for him to not ejaculate, because it's like every single moment of the lovemaking or the masturbation is from this place of like deep connection to the sensation, to the inward experience, rather than like I'm here to do a job to have this sex experience or to have a powerful orgasm. It's like when he loses that goal orientation inside of the experience itself, there's like a deeper emerging that comes through, and just from that place, like ejaculation mastery just happens. And this is like, the men that I've taught, I've been like, oh, like this is not in the books, this is, no one's ever taught me that this is possible. And by creating a relationship to that feminine nature inside of themselves, the ejaculation mastery just happens as a byproduct. So it's not even like he has to try to control his ejaculation.
I think my brain stopped for a second when you talked about the fact that some guys are so goal oriented, they set a goal of not ejaculating for a year. Like,
does that sound awful to you?
First of all, it sounds horrendous. That sounds completely terrible.
It's like a really long cleanse. It's like the master cleanse for a year.
Yeah, but like for a year. First of all, it's almost like setting the goal so not impossibly, but so far into the future that you have written off the experience in order to prove that you don't need it. Right. But then you're not mastering it or even controlling it. You're avoiding it at all costs. So that's, I mean, because we heard like 21 days was one of the things that we heard.
She said start there. She said that's a great place to start. She was starting you out. We met with a sex coach in our last trip to Mexico.
Like a tantric sex teacher or something.
And she's incredible, but that's a place to start. Just like I would never tell someone through food to cleanse for a month. I would say cleanse for 3 days and then advance it to 5 and then to 7 and then go from there. And then all of a sudden you're like, couldn't I eat like this all the time? And you're like, yeah, you could. So it depends on your goals and it depends on, I think your self-work. I think for some people, there's a world in which they're at that point where they want to, abstain for a year, but
it's not abstaining. They abstain from having the ejaculation.
Right. That's what I mean.
I'm saying, so it's just interesting to me. I mean, it's just so funny, right? Look, all the more power to you, whatever you want to do. I just, my brain just went, why would I, the way I understand it, maybe I'm sure there are different reasons for doing this. Part of the reason to delay ejaculation in the first place is so that it's not the end point of sex, because typically in traditional sex, once it's lame and it's patriarchal, that this is the way so many of us have grown up to think of it, but it's like man orgasm done, right? It's like, and so part of the man learning how to control ejaculation is to be able to be in the experience longer and be able to be more part of the pleasure journey for the woman, if it's a man and a woman, versus like, I mean, you've talked about like the jackhammer pounding version of sex before, that's like, how fast can I get to orgasm so that we can get this out of the way? I can get the release and move on with my life.
Yeah.
That's the way I always saw the ejaculation control thing. It's to play a more active, more controlled role in the intimate experience, not to devoid yourself of potential pleasure that may come from it.
Yeah. And one thing I feel to share on that is like the like what happens when a man ejaculates. It's usually like when he's not conscious of it. It's like the ejaculation comes and then he's just like on to the next thing. Like you said, it's like, again, what's the next goal? What's the next goal? And what's the next thing I need to do today? And then what I've experienced when men do this ejaculation mastery with me is that they, when they do actually ejaculate during like this, like they're learning about, what makes them ejaculate, it's often a feeling of kind of becoming like almost like if it's with a partnered sex with a woman, it can be like through the merging of being like coming into the woman's experience. And it's like feeling of like unsafety that can create the ejaculation. The other thing is like when he starts to build that relationship, when he does ejaculate on this journey of ejaculation mastery, I encourage a man to be with every single part of that ejaculation. So it's like he ejaculates, how does it feel to release? And sometimes there is a euphoric experience of releasing. And then often it's then met by guilt or like wanting to be alone or pulling back and like wanting to separate from the partner. And it's just exploring the sensations that are coming up in that. And what I have noticed is a lot of these men, when they start to really be with that consciously, is that there is a reason they want to be alone. And it's not about like not wanting to be with their partner anymore. It's actually about to like be with the parts of themselves that have really been left behind in the day, So in a way, that's actually really, again, the more yin path, right? It's like the pathway inwards. And when a man learns to be with those the really tender parts of himself, and he's not outsourcing that to his maybe female partner, what creates is an ability to create ejaculation, like ability to choose when he ejaculates, because one of the reasons why a man gives up their ejaculation is to stop feeling what he's feeling. It's like he's trying to shift something, like, okay, I don't want to feel this anymore. And when he comes closer to the vulnerability in sexual penetration, it's like he's having to feel all the things that he's not wanted to feel that day.
Yeah.
Or maybe that lifetime, it's like, how long do we put off those things that we don't want to feel?
Yeah, we talk a lot about fuck shame in this podcast. And I feel like the place you're talking about is that shame-based place that a lot of men go into around, right? It's triggered by early masturbation, early discovery of sex, when like it was all hidden and under the surface, and late at night, you didn't want to get walked in on, like those concepts. And now as an adult man, you're still holding on to some of those same triggers, even though you may be married to the person you're having sex with. A lot of that past triggering cues, the things that have been around that were triggering early on are actually gone, but the internal feeling is still present.
Yeah, exactly.
What about people who haven't orgasmed before? Alone or with a partner? Like, what do you have any like initial like thoughts on that? Where would you start?
Yeah, well, I'd start to look at like what is the relationship they have to the other things they're doing in their lives, and that's yeah. I mean, for me, it's like orgasm is like energy moving, right? And so a lot of people that come to me have the experience of like they actually are having orgasms, they're just not present to the orgasm they're having. So energy is always moving in our body, and that's really all it is. It's just like a sensation that's rippling through. And sometimes that can look like, and what I often find is like a blockage of that eros, that life force energy that we're speaking of. So it's like when someone is, using their will and their willpower to create something in their life, rather than when they're letting go to kind of what you might call like divine will, or, that place of surrender that's just like moving through you. And so a lot of the work that I would do that is like getting them connected to their eros, which is again blocked in conditioning, beliefs, ideas, all those things. Maybe the collapse around sex and love, or sex and relationships, or love and sex, like wherever the things are that are collapsing. I start to unpack those and just like pull them apart and just start to go, cool, what if sex was just sex? What if sex can just be something that exists on its own in your life and doesn't have to be related to someone you love or someone you're even having a relationship with? Like breaking it down to like what is sex without any of those things, and what if love gets to exist without relationships? What if relationships get to exist without love? And so once you've broken all those things apart, it almost like frees up all the conditioning and all the shit that's sort of like blocking the contraction to that experience. And I find that sometimes the contraction in the body can be held in the genitals, because the genitals and the anus is like some of the softest tissue that we have inside of the body. And if we are experiencing the shame or the guilt or anything else that we don't want to be feeling, we're not going to wear it on our face. It's like that like it does eventually come out on our face, but like where it will go to first is the place that we can hide. So it's like hiding it in that place inside of the body. And then just like the journey of freeing it up in that area.
Yeah.
And then, and then the shifting of that, like I actually, even for myself and my own, like it's not an orgasm that I would experience this in, but for my own life around like business and like wanting to create, it's like the journey of letting, like for me, like working really hard, or like, like doing 100 things in a day, being on every podcast, doing all the interviews, whatever the thing is, like that is actually an easier place for me to exist rather than the subtleties. Kind of like what you were just saying actually about your meditation. Like it's so much easier for us to go and do and make everything happen rather than sit in the nothingness. Right. But like eros and the orgasms, all that stuff actually happens in the most vulnerable, surrendered space of nothingness. So a lot of what I would need to do with someone when they're doing that is like just actually be a witness to them in their nothingness. And I can do that. So like the modality that I've created is about witnessing people in their self-pleasure. And sometimes it's just actually about witnessing someone in their nothingness. And it's like bringing them like who are you beyond all your identity? And like one of the best places to break people out of their identity is through their sexuality. Because in us, when we're, being wild sexual beings in the bedroom, like we're not like, and now I'm the mum that has to go pick up the kids from school. Like that's so far away from our reality when we're like our most freest, untamed selves. So yeah, they're all interlinked, really, aren't they?
Yeah, there's so many layers.
Yeah, there's so many layers, and I feel like this really describes a lot of the journey stuff that you've talked about, having to go through from childhood to now around sex.
Yeah, it's so layered, and I'm still a work in progress, but a lot of the freedom that I found and liberation I found through my sexuality has been through healing all those different aspects, and really for me to be in a vulnerable, open place to experience lovemaking or sex, fucking, there's a lot of steps to get me there because I have a lot of layers and I have a very full life. So I have to clear away the clutter before I can get to that place of being centered. And I honor myself and my practice so highly that I don't just want to be sloppy and just have sex quickly and not be present. I want to be present to my partner and to myself. So in order to do that, there are a lot of things that have to get me there. And I know that about myself. And my partner knows that mostly about myself too. And so we figure it out together, right? So we ask all of our guests 5 questions. So just the first thing that comes to mind, the first one being, what is the greatest advice that you've ever received?
This is a really odd one, but it's, I had a mentor once say to me, sometimes it looks exactly the same on the outside, but it's coming from a completely different place. And what that means to me is it kind of actually, even what you just shared, Soph, about the I don't want to have fast sex. It's like, what if we had fast sex, but it was super present, something like that, and it can be used across so many different like ideas. And it's also like, for me, like the spiritual path, like sometimes I have these desires to just like go and be a monk in a cave, and just like meditate, because I'm like, the world is so much. And, actually like my spiritual path often is being out there on the stage, or, sometimes the orgasm is being on stage and talking about the message of sexuality. And like, it's like the same thing, but it's coming from a completely different place inside of me. So the same experience I have being a monk in a cave is actually what I'm doing right now. This is my spiritual path. So yeah, that's something
it can look different than what you imagine it needed to.
Yeah, exactly.
What has been your greatest moment to date?
Yeah, I think like the birthing of the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy was one of those moments. Like I just had this feeling of like, it just feels like elation. It's like grace, it's like, it feels like, the power of grace just like moving through me. And just the fruition of so much sex magic. And I'm like, wow, this is actually like a moment where I was like, wow, this is like everything that I believe is now true. It's like, you don't have to push things really hard. All the stories that I had, like I had a story that once that I was like, I started a degree a few years ago and I was like, when I finish my degree, I'll start my business. And then I started working with sex magic and I still haven't finished my degree. And, I've got a business and a school and all these things. I'm like, wow, this is like when time and space actually just like collapses and something is birthed. Like that is, so pivotal for my experience of life, and the magic that has just unfolded since that experience has been just wow.
Love it.
What about your hardest moment to date, or one of your hardest moments?
I think I have my hardest moment every time I have to get on stage and talk about this message. It's like, it's so hard for me. Like, and that's, I was talking about that spiritual path. Like public speaking is like, I go on stage and I feel like I'm having the experience that everyone else is having around their sex life. Like that's like that dragon they just don't want to look at. They don't want to even like start thinking about their sexuality because it's so vulnerable. Like I have that every time I stand on stage, because I'm just like, it's like the feeling of, am I going to be rejected? I don't have any belonging. These people are going to think I'm a crazy sex lady. Just like all my stuff just like comes up, and it's perfect, and it's just that edge every time. It like makes me feel so sick, and I just feel continually pulled to keep standing on stages.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, cool.
What about your self-care practice? Do you have a daily self-care? Does it change?
Yeah, it changes. And I think that's actually one of my, I say it changes, but it's always self-pleasure in a way, but self-pleasure looks different, and sometimes self-pleasure is the nothingness of like what might look like meditation, but I'm still kind of doing the same thing because I'm, dropping into the sensations beyond the thought, and I'm journeying from that place. And sometimes I'm using movement. Sometimes I'm sitting in front of my altar. I just bought a harp that I'm really excited about. I'm starting to play the harp. And also I think that that's part of it. It's like, how I was saying like aliveness. Like for me, the aliveness is like, where's the next vulnerable part? And I've had a bit of a journey with more of this like, what I call like the dark feminine. It's like this, orchestrator of all the things and being, and like kind of like the more dark witch energy that's like quite wild and chaotic. And now I feel like, just like I said, I just put a harp. I feel like I'm dropping into this real like Mother Mary energy, and it's just like, that is like, it's like what needs to move through now to give me more access to whatever that wants to happen inside of me. So what's happening inside of me right now is like this deep softness and this deep, like, I don't even want to say vulnerability. It's more just like tenderness, this tenderness that wants to move through me. And that's where my aliveness lives right now. So that's what I'm journeying.
I love that. Digging into what makes you feel alive through vulnerability and dropping in. Like that for me, it's like just dropping in. What's going to drop me in this moment? Just asking my like best self, what would drop me in right now? And then picking from that list of things. Yeah.
What's beyond identity? What would be like completely not my identity right now?
Yeah.
We call this podcast Ignited. You talked about some of this already, but what gets you ignited?
Ironically, the public speaking definitely ignites me right now. It's the radical discontinuity that excites me and ignites me. It's like, when I start to play beyond anything that I think is me. And I think, because like I said, that's where sex exists. It's like when we're in the full throes of our sexual experience. And even now, like even like that we were saying at the beginning of the podcast, like this journey of sexual mastery, like that still ignites me every fucking day. Like I'm allowed to swear on this podcast. It's like this experience of like every day I wake up and I'm just like, oh, I just want to go deeper into like this mystery, you know, like that's the thing I love about this. Is like I will never, like no one will ever fully understand sex, because it's just like this, you know, it's like these threads of consciousness that we just keep getting to pull and just like learning. So yeah, like that experience of just waking up every day and knowing that I'm going to learn something new. It's like, that's why I'm committed to this journey.
It's beautiful.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us and your time. We really appreciate it. And where can our listeners find you?
So what I would love to offer your listeners actually is I have a sex magic meditation, which actually can get you very ignited and can drop you into that. So you can find that at victoriaredbard.com. You'll find it just on the page there. And if you want to like read more about all the work I've been doing, or like hear more about the Institute for New Paradigm Intimacy, we also have some programs around, you know, sex magic and the Eros Vault, which is like a collection of like moving through traumas and all that kind of stuff. You can find that on Victoria Redbard on Facebook and Victoria Redbard on Instagram.
Perfect.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. You're out in Australia, so have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And for the rest of you, tag us, tag Victoria, let us know what settled, what really felt impactful in today's episode. We'd love to hear from you.
Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So much love.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.